sitting in an easy posture is called swasti samasinaha. It is recommended in the yoga scripture that one should put the soles of the feet between the two thighs and ankles and sit straight. That posture will help one to concentrate his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This very process is also recommended in Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter. It is further suggested that one sit in a secluded, sanctified spot. The seat should consist of deer skin and kusha grass topped with cotton. So we are reading these verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by Kapila Deva to his mother Devahuti. And here he is describing the process of dhyana, meditation. And very similar to what is described in the Bhagavad Gita, Shuchau deshe pratisthapya. One should go to a Shuchau deshe, Shuchi desha means a sacred place, a sanctified place. And Vijitasana asanam, tasmin swasti samasina rujukaya samabhyaset. Arrange a seat and sit and master the sitting postures, and sitting in a easy posture, rujukaya samabhyaset, with one's back erect, and practice the breath control. And in this context, Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, Shuchau deshe pratisthapya immediately refers to going to a holy place, a sanctified place, like Rishikesh, Haridwar, banks of Ganges, banks of Yamuna, and such places, and says it does not refer to modern cities. So in other words, Prabhupada points out that this dhyana process is practiced in such places. Even in our country in the past, we hear about, in the Puranas, we hear about kings retiring from the kingdom. They didn't decide to stay in the kingdom itself somewhere. I'll do this dhyana process. But they went to the Himalayas, they went to some holy place, which will help them control their minds, because that is the process that is recommended in dhyana, and not suitable for people living in modern cities, because this whole process requires another kind of this is a different kind of an approach. So in this context, we also see in the Bhagavatam there are many places this kind of a dhyana is mentioned. Like here Kapila is telling Devahuti. We also come across Narada instructing Dhruva to do this kind of a dhyana, also going to a holy place. And Dhruva went to a holy place in Vrindavan. So many places this dhyana is mentioned. And so one may want to have an overall perspective of what the Vedic literatures are talking about. What is dhyana? What is with relation to bhakti? How does that relate? Because in the beginning process, in the beginning of this chapter, Prabhupada mentioned that Dhyana is being described because it is one of the Vaishnava disciplines, one of the Vaishnava practices. Dhyana is a Vaishnava practice. So how do we understand all of that? This is nicely described in the Bhagavad Gita purports and also in another place in the same canto by Srila Prabhupada. By and large, it is like this. There are two methods of approaching the absolute truth. To approach the absolute truth, to come in touch with the absolute truth, Param Satya, and to experience the association or coming in touch with the absolute truth. And an understanding of the absolute truth. That's the purpose of the Vedic literatures. To understand Param Satya. What is the ultimate truth? What is the absolute truth? What is the supreme truth? Because in our material affairs we come across relative truths. Truths which are relative, truths which are temporary, depending on another truth. Those are called relative truths. Like the understanding that I'm a person living here in this world is a relative understanding because my existence is dependent on the existence of my parents from whom I have come. So my existence is a relative existence. I exist, and it's a truth, I exist, but that truth is relative. Now, my parents' existence is also relative because their existence is dependent on the existence of their parents, and so on. So what is that absolute truth which is not dependent on anything else? So that's the purpose of the Vedic literatures, to help us understand that. So now there are different methods mentioned all over in the Vedic literatures, how to approach that absolute truth and so on. So an overview of all of this is presented by Srila Prabhupada, and that he describes as there is one direct method of approaching the absolute truth and there is an indirect method of approaching the absolute truth. First, let's understand what is the indirect approach. Indirect approach is you organize the society in the material world according to varnas and ashramas, and people have different natures, and then they do their respective duties according to the varna and according to the ashrama. And when they do their duties in a detached manner and gradually enjoy the senses, dharma, artha, kama, all of that, then gradually when they do that, there is a certain amount of detachment that they have to practice, and that will bring about a certain enlightenment in them. So this entire process where there is a certain sacrifice of phala, karma phala tyaga, and when you do karma phala tyaga, then there is a certain amount of enlightenment, and that is called jnana. When one begins to discern matter and spirit. And generally, the jnana process helps them to understand one feature of the absolute truth called the Brahman. That's not the totality of absolute truth. It helps them to understand an all-pervading, eternal, formless, absolute truth, which is called Brahman. And if they are fortunate, if they get guided properly, then they can further make progress to a stage of dhyana. And If they practice dhyana as it is being described here by Kapila and in many other places in the Bhagavatam, including the Bhagavad Gita, in the dhyana there is the art, the control of the sitting postures, many rules and regulations, controlling the breath, and all of that in order to calm the mind and control the senses. Because if the mind is not calmed and if the mind is not, senses are not controlled, there's no possibility of making any spiritual progress. So by this, one will do dhyana and meditate on the form of the Lord in the heart. In that way, one begins to realize another feature of the absolute truth called the localized feature, the Paramatma feature. The Paramatma feature present in the heart of every living entity as well as present in every atom in the material world. And if one does dhyana, becomes purified, controls the senses, meditates on Paramatma, and if one is fortunate again to get further guided, one can gradually understand that Paramatma in the original Paramatma is in Vaikuntha, and I must transfer myself to Vaikuntha, and there I can render bhakti. So this is finally they come to the process of bhakti, because bhakti is the ultimate way. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha. If you want to understand the truth, it has to be by bhakti. So final understanding of the absolute truth is by bhakti, and this is one method of approach of the absolute truth. Karma phala tyaga results in enlightenment, jnana. Jnana advances to dhyana, and from dhyana you further progress to bhakti, and in that stage you will understand the absolute truth. So bhakti is higher than dhyana, and dhyana is higher than jnana, and jnana is higher than karma phala tyaga, varnashrama, and all of that. And in the varnashrama there is also recommendation, doing charity and all of that. That's karma phala tyaga. So that is the indirect method. There is another method that is called the direct method. And the direct method, where one does karma phala tyaga but is directly introduced about the absolute truth. You offer the karma phala, not just be detached from it, but directly offer the fruits of the labor to Krishna, to that supreme absolute truth. Mat karma krin, Krishna refers to in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Do my work, Krishna karma. So that is one kind, so it begins in that way. And then when we perform activities for Krishna, offer the results of our activities to Krishna, then we get introduced to a certain devotional practices, bhakti, practice of bhakti, and that is called sadhana bhakti. And when one does sadhana bhakti, one gets gradually purified and comes to a stage of raganuga bhakti, and one will have further progress to prema bhakti, and one will have complete realization of the absolute truth, Krishna. Broadly, this is the whole program that is mentioned everywhere in the Vedic literature. These are the two methods, the indirect method and the direct method. So, in the direct method, directly you offer the results of your activities to Krishna, and then practice other devotional practices, and then you become more purified and achieve pure bhakti. So that's a direct process that is also described in the Vedic literatures. For some people, the indirect process is required. For some people, the direct process is good. The indirect process does not require so much faith. We can do it mechanically and gradually and pursue a certain amount of sense gratification in this material world. It doesn't require so much of detachment, because in the karma phala tyaga stage, in the varnashrama, there is a lot of opportunity for enjoying the senses and in a controlled way. And so charity, vratas, do some of those karmas, and all of that. There is a lot of karma kanda aspect in that. So by and large, a lot of people are interested in sense gratification. So that process is there. But then gradually one becomes enlightened, jnana, and then further dhyana, and then dhyana further matures into bhakti. So detachment, understanding of Brahman, realization of Paramatma, and realization of Bhagavan, which is the complete realization. So this is a gradual, step-by-step process. The other process is directly aiming towards Krishna by offering the results to Krishna, working for Krishna, practicing some regulated bhakti, and that bhakti, regulated bhakti, leads to pure bhakti. And by pure bhakti, one understands complete absolute truth. So these are the two methods that are recommended. But for Kali Yuga, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu points out is that the indirect method is very risky. One cannot practice varnashrama properly. One can become very attached to the sense gratification opportunities that are offered in the process. And hence, when Vyasadeva had compiled all of these Vedic literatures, when he met Narada, and when he was feeling that something I have not done completely, and then when Narada explains, he says that this indirect method that you have recommended, by and large in all of the Vedic literatures, it is a jugupsitam mahan vyatikramaha. It is simply an abominable, condemnable process. And it is a great mistake, blunder you have committed. And then Narada advises him to write about the direct process, and that's how the Bhagavatam comes about. So, Bhagavatam stresses the direct process, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, presenting that, talks about the direct process rather than the indirect process. Now, the indirect process of dhyana, some of these are mentioned in the Vedic literature, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, because dhyana, for instance, is also about understanding the Paramatma and transferring to Vaikuntha Loka. It's almost there at the very high level. Because Varnashrama, Jnana, Dhyana, and then Bhakti, you're almost there. But the dhyana process is not practical for this age, especially for the people living in the cities. Because it says, Shuchau deshe pratishtapya. You have to go to a sacred place. And hence this is not very practical. The other method is one can offer the results of one's activities and work for Krishna. And you can do that process in any circumstance, including a circumstance like somebody is in a battlefield, like Arjuna was in. He was able to fight because it was Krishna's work, and doing Krishna's work is that stage. So, like this, the two methods have been recommended, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's recommendation is that one should follow the direct process. Another example of how the indirect process fails is the practice of karmakanda by the people, and because karmakanda allows a certain amount of demigod worship and offering meat and in a regulated way, and that is allowed. And hence, when people try to practice that at a certain stage, they became so attached to eating meat and killing animals, and they converted all the temples into slaughterhouses. And when people question them, how are you killing animals? See, it is given in the Vedas. We can kill the animals. And so, at that time, Lord had to appear as Buddha in order to teach the principle of ahimsa. So, this is also explained by Narada, and in the Narada Muni and Vyasadeva's conversation. When Narada said that Jugupsitam, what you have done is abominable. So Vyasadeva said, no, I have also put some regulations. I have said that you can enjoy, but in a regulated way. But people in Kali Yuga, where Rajoguna and Tamoguna are prominent, they will be so carried away by the spirit of enjoyment that is permitted in the karma kanda. Tasya nivaranam, tasya manyate nivaranam janaha, na manyate nivaranam janaha. Narada Muni says, they will hardly care for your regulations, restrictions. Exactly as it happened. And Lord Buddha had to appear in order to set right the things. So the indirect process is filled with risks and may not result in the ultimate realization of the absolute truth. And also, it may take many, many lifetimes of progress. The indirect process is a slow process. The direct process, on the other hand, is practicing regulated bhakti, sadhana bhakti, offering the results of our activities to Krishna directly, and in this way approaching the absolute truth, which is the direct process. And now this direct process was referred to by Krishna in the conversation, was emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, although it is Mahabharata, it is describing all the intrigues between the Pandavas and the Kauravas and all that is happening, and Krishna involved in some of these things. All that is explained. In the middle of that, Krishna's dialogue, conversation, Krishna's instructions to Arjuna is full of the direct process and not the indirect process. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadanti avipaschitaha. Right in the second chapter, Krishna is referring. There is another indirect process. And Veda Vada Ratha Apartha. These people who are followers of the Vedas, they follow that. And they think that this is the highest thing. Bhoga Ishwarya Gatim Prati. To make progress on the path of Bhoga and Aishwarya. That's the highest thing. Nanyadasti iti vadinaha. And they consider this is the highest thing. There are people like that. That's referring to the indirect process. But then Krishna says, no. There is another process. Bhoga Ishwarya Prasaktanam Taya Apahrutat Chetasam Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Samadhav na vidhiyate. That samadhi, complete absorption in the absolute truth, is not possible for those who are attached to the path of enjoyment and opulence. Bhoga Ishwarya Gatim Prati. So he begins to tell, and finally in the 18th chapter, Krishna is saying, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. What is that all dharma parityajya he is saying? I think I mentioned this story. Once one person came, he came to our temple and he said, I have found one mistake in Bhagavad Gita. I said, oh really? What is this Bhagavad? No, so many acharyas have written commentaries on Gita. Nobody has said. Then his explanation was this. Krishna is saying, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Because earlier he said, Dharma Pratisthapana, Dharma Samsthapanarthaya Sambhavami. In order to establish Dharma, I come. But later on, Krishna is saying, Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharana. It should be Sarva Adharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharana. It should be giving up Adharma. That should have been the thing. He says, no. Krishna is saying, Dharman Parityajya Mamekam. Dharman Parityajya referring to the indirect process. And now surrender to me, which is the direct process. Now, this direct process is there here and there, because bhakti element has to be there in every process, whether it is dhyana, whether it is kriya, karma, whatever process. A little bit of bhakti has to be there for spiritual progress to come about. So, bhakti element is required. But in all of those, there is a mix of bhakti. What about direct bhakti, pure bhakti? So here and there, this process of pure bhakti was known to many sages, and they discussed this. But knowing that there are different kinds of people in the society, varnashrama, all of that worship of the devatas, all that was relevant. Because there are different kinds of people in the society. Not everyone can practice it. So the indirect processes were by and large described, and all such examples were cited in the Puranas, and Veda Vyasa had compiled all of them. So there was the karma, there was the jnana, all of that was there. But here and there was also exalted devotee, exalted personalities who knew about the direct process. And the direct process is called the Bhagavatam process. Bhagavatam means in connection with Bhagavan. Directly in connection with Bhagavan. This process was known. So, Vyasadeva, when he was instructed by Narada, now you compile a Vedic literature, now he recalled that I have myself spoken this direct process to my son, Shukadeva. Vyasadeva knew that, and he had spoken that to his son, Adyagat Mahadakhyanam. So that my son, I had spoken, because I saw my son, he was refusing to be born, come out of the mother's womb for several years. And finally he came out. And then after he came out, he walked away. I was calling out, my dear son, no, you are my son. I have to do the regular purificatory processes. But he just walked away. And I was feeling great separation, and I was calling Putra iti. I was calling out, my dear son, my dear son. All the trees that were there all reflected my words, and they also called out Putra, Putra iti. In other words, the trees were echoing and the son walked away. So then I realized my son is a very exalted person, and so I have to teach him the very exalted message, the highest direct process, and I taught him the Bhagavatam and he learned it. There was another occasion, the sages of Naimisharanya gathered, and they wanted to know what is the ultimate essence of all the Vedic literatures. Kali Yuga is coming, and at that time there was one great devotee who knew this Bhagavatam, and he spoke that Bhagavatam to them. That is in the sages of Naimisharanya, Sutta Goswami spoke. There was another occasion, Parikshit, he was cursed to die in 7 days. And when he renounced the kingdom and he was preparing to die, many sages came, and Parikshit asked him, what is the duty of a man about to die? And they all were coming up with different ideas. There was a lot of confusion. Some were saying dhyana, some were saying you should do varnashrama, some were saying no, you should do something else. And there was confusion. At that time, Shukadev came And Shukadeva knew the Bhagavatam and he spoke, and everyone became silent and said, yes, what he is saying, that's the ultimate thing, suitable for a great person like Parikshit. And there that conversation happened. So like this, there were many, many occasions where Yamaraj spoke to Yamadutas. When the Yamadutas tried to conquer Ajamila, and they could not. Some other strange personalities came and stopped them, and they went back to Yamaraj and asked, what is this happening? And then Yamaraj told them the Bhagavata knowledge. So like this, Vyasadeva compiles all those instances where the Bhagavata knowledge, the direct process, was explained by great personalities. And all of those he compiled together and formed the Bhagavatam. And this is the essence of all the Vedic literatures. And this is most suitable for Kali Yuga. And this process has to be practiced. Now, for the direct process to work, one or two important features are required. If you take all of these examples, when Shukadev was instructed by Vedavyasa, Parikshit was instructed by Shukadev, the sages of Naimisharanya were instructed by Sutta Goswami, or Yamadutas were instructed by Yamaraj, and so many. Dhruva was instructed by Narada. Like that, many, many examples if you take. In all of these, for the Bhagavata process, the direct, quick process to work, one important feature is, you must come in touch with a pure devotee who knows Krishna, who has that intimate understanding of Krishna. That is the trigger for the direct process, and not always easy. And so, Bhagavatam process, for it to work, we have to come in touch with a pure devotee and serve a pure devotee. And another important feature for the Bhagavata process to work, which is an accelerated process, direct process, and that requirement is to chant the holy name of the Lord, to come in touch with the Lord directly. And for Kali Yuga, the Lord has appeared in the form of holy name, and to chant the holy name. This whole thing is described in a very succinct manner in this purport. I will read this one. As mentioned in the previous verses, there are two kinds of devotional service: the way of regulated principles and the way of full attachment in love to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is referring to the ultimate process. There are two kinds of devotional service: the way of regulated principles and the way of full attachment. The full attachment is having full bhakti, highest level of prema bhakti. If you cannot do that, even to achieve that, you have to do regulated bhakti. For those who are actually not able to follow the principles of Krishna consciousness, it is better to cultivate knowledge, because by knowledge one can be able to understand his real position. Gradually, knowledge will develop to the point of meditation, jnana to meditation. By meditation, one can be able to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by a gradual process. There are processes which make one understand that one himself is the Supreme, and that sort of meditation is preferred if one is unable to engage in devotional service. If one is not able to meditate in such a way, then there are prescribed duties as enjoined in the Vedic literature for the Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Shudras, which we shall find later in the chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now coming back to the karma phala tyaga. One should give up the results of chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But in all cases, one should give up the result or fruits of labor. This means to employ the result of karma for some good cause, like hospitals and such charities. In summary, to reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the highest goal, there are two processes. One process is by gradual development, and the other process is direct. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the direct method. And the other method involves renouncing the fruits of one's activities. Then one can come to the stage of knowledge, then to the stage of meditation, then to the stage of understanding the super soul, and then to the stage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One may either take the step-by-step process or the indirect path. The direct process is not possible for everyone. Therefore, the indirect process is also good. It is, however, to be understood that the indirect process is not recommended for Arjuna because he is already at the stage of loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord. It is for others who are not at this stage. For them, the gradual process of renunciation, knowledge, meditation, and realization of the super soul and Brahman should be followed. But as far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, it is the direct method that is stressed. Everyone is advised to take to the direct method and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So this is the process, and that is recommended by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is the process that the entire Bhagavatam is all about. How to take the direct process, and that was further summarized by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as sadhana bhakti, and that leads to raganuga bhakti. And as we advance in raganuga bhakti, we come to higher stages of prema bhakti. One will have complete understanding of the absolute truth. So this is the overall picture that we get, and so in that sense we see that dhyana was recommended, like Kapila is mentioning, because it was more suitable for other ages. Valmiki did, Dhruva did, and all of these examples are there because it was suitable for another age, and one could make gradual progress in understanding Paramatma, and then the ability to transfer to Vaikuntha Loka. Now in the Bhagavatam, another aspect that was also mentioned by Narada Muni to Vyasadeva is to disclose the highest aspects of Krishna and his personality, his nature and his activities. And Krishna had just then appeared 5,000 years ago. And so Vyasadeva wanted to disclose about Krishna's activities. And among them, the Vraja activities, Krishna's activities for those 10 years and 7 months when he was in Vrindavan, those are considered even more exalted because there he exhibited the Madhurya Bhakti, pure Madhurya Bhakti. And so those are also very, very confidential aspects, and Vyasadeva explains all of that. So like this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu helps us to get an overview of the whole Vedic process, what falls into, where all these things fall into place, and what is the position of bhakti, what is the position of the Bhagavatam process. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.